Yo, what's good, all my guardians and guardianettes? Two-Face Gaming here, and I'm back with another video. Today, I have not one, not two, but 300 strand builds for you guys. You guys are going to love today's build, so make sure you drop a like on the video. Comment down below what you guys want to see in the future and which build is your favorite. And don't forget to subscribe to join the Two-Face culture. I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's jump straight into the first build. Alright guys, so the first build is going to be a Grapple Melee build. We're going to be utilizing the Grapple Grenade to move around the map and utilize the melee that comes after the grapple. This does not consume a melee charge, so you can do this infinitely. Our aspects are going to be Whittle Silk to give us a second grenade charge, and Whirling Maelstrom to spawn a Tangled Tasmanian Devil that will basically go around the map and damage everything for us. For our fragments, we're going to be running Thread of Propagation, Thread of Fury, Thread of Generation, and Thread of Warding. Thread of Propagation is going to give us Unraveling rounds with our strand weapons when we get powered melee kills. That does count for the Grapple Melee. Thread of Fury is going to give us melee energy off Tangle kills. Thread of Generation, we're going to be running on all three builds for extra grenade energy. And Thread of Warding is going to give us Woven Mail when we pick up an Orb of Power. For our mod setup, we're going to be running Strand Siphon and Hands On to help our super energy off of grenade kills and strand weapon kills. Grenade Kickstart and Impact Induction to help our grenade recharge rate. Resistances on the chest piece are personal preference. On the legs, we're going to be running Elemental Charge and Strand Weapon Surge. And on the class item, we're going to be running Double Bomber and Reaper to help with our grenade recharge rate even more. Our weapons of choice on all three of these builds will just be a strand exotic weapon, so Quicksilver Storm, Final Warning, Navigator, or Wishkeeper, with an emphasis being on Wishkeeper on the second build, and I will get to that later in the video. Our stat allocations for all three of these builds are going to be focused towards Resilience first, and then Discipline on this build and Mobility on the next two builds. So this build is probably my favorite out of the three builds. How the gameplay loop works is we're just going to be tossing tangles at enemies. You can also grapple onto these tangles, as you can see, to travel great distances. But we're mainly using the tangles to damage enemies. And we're going to grapple onto enemies as well to activate the melee and go invisible and heal. That is the one weakness of this build, is probably the healing, but that is why we are countering that with Assassin's Cowl, so that we can go invis and heal off of those melees. And like I said, the Grapple Melee is infinite and it does not use up a melee charge, so you basically have two ways of going invis here. You could swap out Assassin's Cowl with Sidorakni's Facade. That will give you Woven Mail whenever you grapple. But I personally like the Assassin's Cowl more because it's a little bit more reliable on the survivability side of things. The only thing I would avoid using this build in is GM Nightfalls or anything that can really one-shot you, because while being in the air grappling is a ton of fun, it's not ideal for stuff like Grandmaster Nightfalls because you really need to be at further distances and not up close and personal. But if you are a daredevil like myself and you want to try something a little bit different in a Grandmaster Nightfall, this will work. Just be cautious of the danger you're putting yourself in by grappling up to enemies. But that's going to wrap it up for our Grapple Melee build. Let's jump straight into the second build. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so the second build is going to be a Suspend build using Shackle Grenades. The Shackle Grenade is going to suspend enemies when we throw it at them. And then we're going to be using Ensnaring Slam in order to suspend enemies even more, and Whirling Maelstrom in order to do more damage to suspended enemies. For our fragments, we're going to be running Thread of Mind. This will help us gain class ability energy when we suspend targets. Thread of Wisdom will help us create Orbs of Power when we suspend targets. Thread of Generation, like I said before, will be running on all three builds to help our grenade energy. And Thread of Continuity will increase the duration we can suspend enemies for. Now you're probably wondering why I'm not running Thread of Warding for the extra Woven Mail. I do not feel like that is necessary on a Suspend build because enemies cannot shoot you while they're suspended. So I'd rather have them suspended for longer than have that Woven Mail. Now the mod setup on this build is going to be a little bit different than the mod setup on the previous build. We're going to be running Double Strand Siphon to gain super energy off of our strand weapons, and then Dynamo to gain super energy off of our class ability usage. And then just like last time, we're going to be using Grenade Kickstart with Impact Induction. On the chest piece, the resistances are personal preference. And then once again on the legs, we're going to be running Elemental Charge and Strand Weapon Surge. And on the class item, this time we're going to be using double utility kickstart along with a bomber to help our grenade recharge and our dodge recharge. At least one copy of utility kickstart is a requirement for this in our next build. This will help our dodge recharge tremendously. In the clip I am about to show you, I am not running any utility kickstart, and you'll see how fast we're getting our dodge, but with this, we'll make sure we have it at all times to make sure we are suspending at a rapid rate. Once again, for stat allocations, we're going to be focusing on resiliency first, and then you want to focus on mobility over discipline on this build just because we're using a dodge. Weapons of choice is going to be an exotic strand primary just like last time, but this time we want to utilize the Wishkeeper more than the other ones because that will help us suspend enemies more than the other weapons. Unfortunately, I do not have Wishkeeper, so I'm going to be using Quicksilver Storm in all of these builds, but in the Suspend build, make sure you're using Wishkeeper to suspend as much as possible. So the gameplay loop for this one is pretty straightforward. We're just going to be using our Shackle Grenades and our Ensnaring Slam to suspend as many targets as possible, and then throwing Tangles at them to damage them while they're suspended. Now with the Whirling Maelstrom, you could swap this out with Widow Silk if you don't feel like you need it. For me, I like to play aggressive with my Ensnaring Slam build, so I prefer Whirling Maelstrom so that I can keep that aggression going. We're getting enough dodge energy back anyway to where we don't really need a second Shackle Grenade. But if you want to run a second Shackle Grenade, it is useful on this build as well. Unlike the last build, this build is very useful in Grandmaster Nightfalls, and you can suspend everything from either up close or from a distance. It is really versatile in that regard, and if you pair it with the Wishkeeper bow, then you can really suspend anything you want at any distance. It's a super strong build, and I recommend bringing it into GM Nightfalls every time. I also do not recommend this build for solo content because of the lack of healing on the build. On solo content, I prefer to have builds that will heal me as much as possible, and this build just does not do that, but in a team setting, this is one of the best builds you can run. You'll be suspending everything for your teammates, and it'll make it easier to hit their shots. But that's going to wrap it up for the Shackle Suspend build. Without further ado, let's jump straight into our third and final build. Our third and final strand build is going to be utilizing the last grenade we have not used, which is the Threadling Grenade. This is going to be a Threadling spam build that you can use in either PvE or PvP. So of course our grenade of choice is going to be Threadling Grenades. For the aspects, we're going to be running Widow's Silk for the extra Threadling Grenade and Threaded Spectre. Threaded Spectre is going to give us a clone when we dodge, and it'll take aggro off of yourself and also spawn Threadlings when you kill the clone. For our fragments of choice, we're going to be running Thread of Rebirth and Thread of Evolution. Thread of Rebirth is going to be spawning a Threadling off of strand weapon kills, and Evolution is going to be making those Threadlings go further and do extra damage. Generation is going to help with our grenade recharge on the build. And for the final slot, this is personal preference, but I like to use Thread of Finality in PvE. If you're going to be playing PvP, I recommend Thread of Ascent, and you can also use Thread of Warding if you want Woven Mail instead of more Threadlings. The final fragment slot on this build is super interchangeable though, so really run whatever you guys feel like running. And I forgot to mention our exotic of choice in the second and third build. We're going to be utilizing 6 Coyote in both of these builds. This will give us a second dodge to allow us to slam more on the Ensnaring Slam build and give us an extra clone on this build. Also, I just want to take a quick pause and thank you guys for all the support you've been showing me on the videos. If you guys want to see more quality content from me in the future, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, the mod setup on this build is going to be similar to the setup on the last build. I think it is exactly the same mods as the last setup. Any build where we're going to be focusing on using our dodge the most, this is the setup you want to run. Of course, double utility kickstart on the class item will help us with our class ability and making sure it's up at all times. And as per usual, the weapon setup is going to be any strand exotic primary, and our stat allocations are going to be focused towards resilience, mobility, and discipline. Now, the gameplay loop for this final build is extremely simple. We're basically just going to be spamming as many Threadlings as possible, but I want to show you guys something cool with Threaded Spectre that you may or may not have known. I mentioned earlier that Threaded Spectre takes aggro off of enemies. I wanted to show you guys exactly how that works. So I'm just going to damage some enemies here and they're going to start firing at me. So as you can see, all of the enemies are taking aggro on me in the area, but I'm just going to dodge real quick. And now you can see that all the enemies are now aggroed on the clone. This is an extremely useful trick in more difficult content, and it's why we're feeding into our dodge ability so that we can constantly have this ability up and not have to worry about enemies taking aggro on us. And on top of that, we're also getting more threadlings every time they destroy it, so that can't hurt the build. And if you don't feel like waiting on the enemies to kill the clone for you, you can shoot the clone and detonate it yourself to spawn those threadlings. This build is the jack of all trades for strand builds. You can run this in any content. It is super customizable and is probably the most versatile build that I have mentioned so far. And that's going to wrap it up for the triple strand build video on Hunter. Thank you guys so much for coming and watching today's video. Real quick, I want to update you guys on my schedule going forward. So I work about 50 hours a week, so I apologize if I'm not able to get videos out faster to you guys. But on the bright side, I have been working on a bunch of videos over the past 3 weeks. Don't worry, I haven't been slouching. I've been on the grind. I have videos dropping to you guys in about 3 to 5 days, and that should be consistent going forward. But if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like down below. It really helps a lot in supporting my channel. Comment what you guys want to see in the future and let me know which one of the 3 builds was your favorite. And don't forget to subscribe to join the two-face culture. Guardians and Guardianettes, stay humble and true. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.